tastes like dirt. God, it's not good. Q&A day. Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Engine Gremlin. Today we are doing a mailbag episode where we talk about and answer the questions that you guys have submitted to us. Now, since the last time that we had a mailbag episode, we have actually reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a huge milestone for us. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and subscribing. But for the few of you who watched the original mailbag episode, so episode 1, some of you have reached out to us and well, you've called us out on something that we said in that episode, and for those of you who didn't see that episode, let's do a quick recap. All right, so this next question comes from Tracy. If you get enough views or subscribers, will you do any subscriber rewards? For example, if you reach 1,000 subscribers, would you eat a whole potato raw on camera or something else a little crazier? Yes. What do you want? I get 1,000 subscribers, or hell, name your price. Name your price. I will do it. So I am here today to literally eat my words. Now, since I am a man of my word, if we reach 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, we will follow through with another subscriber reward. We don't have anything planned in mind, so if there's something you'd like us to see us do, please let us know in the comments or let us know on Instagram, whether that be a punishment for one of us, although I prefer not to do that. Or maybe you want us to do a specific episode, like a blooper reel, or maybe certain skits, or if you want us to do something specific about the car, whatever it is, let us know in the comments, and we'll pick the one that we think is the best, and when we reach 2,000 subscribers, we will follow through with it, whatever it is. So let us know in the comments what you'd like, and don't forget to subscribe. God, I need something to wash that down with. Ugh. That's better. That's better. Really takes away the dirt taste. I did wash these, but man, it sticks with the potato. So the first thing that I want to address is over the last couple of weeks, a lot of you have made some comments as we've been releasing the How to Build the Ultimate Ford Straight 6 series on YouTube. A lot of you have kind of made comments that, it's not really ultimate at this point. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of modifications to the Ford 200 that you've done, but nothing that's totally out of the extreme. In the end, you're still with, working with a naturally aspirated Ford Straight 6. And you're absolutely right. But we are not too ultimate yet. A lot of you have talked about, how the Barra is the ultimate Ford Straight 6. And for now, I would say that's absolutely true. I think the horsepower record for a Barra engine is 2,200 horsepower. I mean, that thing is insane. However, I will say that there are some things in work for us to at least give it some competition. Now, will our motor ever reach 2,200 horsepower? No. This is about as far as we're going to go with this motor, save for some EFI and boost, but we have another motor in the works that builds on all of this information, and that's kind of what we want to address, is that we're not to ultimate yet. We are doing these motors in stages. So stage 1 is, your generic block building and head building, so that you have bolt-on mods or maybe some slightly more extravagant mods that just about anybody can do, and that you're going to end up with a fairly powerful, really reliable motor. And you can kind of pick and choose from the modifications that you want with respect to what your end goals with the motor are. That's stage 1. So all relatively straightforward. Now phase 2, or stage 2 I should say, is going to be with respect to EFI and boost. We're going to be implementing the full EFI suite on this motor, so coil near plug, Holley HP ECU, cam and crank syncs, sequential port fuel injection, kind of everything across the board there on the EFI side. And we're going to be showing you all the hardware that we're using for this build so that you have the parts list, and we're going to be showing you how to do it. Then once that's done, we're going to be adding boost later once it's in the car. And we're also going to be dynoing this motor in its naturally aspirated state. We'll dyno it again once it's in the car because we'll have it running when it's naturally aspirated. So we'll have the power to the wheels, and then we'll be able to do a comparison with boost with power to the wheels so we know what our performance gains is, and we have an apples to apples comparison without having to factor in the drivetrain losses. So that's stage 1 and stage 2, and we're going to be doing this over about 8 or 9 parts, and we've only done 2 parts so far. Now stage 3 is where we reach the ultimate level, and regrettably I cannot really talk about what the ultimate phase is. I will briefly mention a thing or two about it later in this Q&A episode in one of our last questions, but suffice it to say it's kind of secret right now. We don't want to give anything away just yet, but I do hope to give the Bara a run for its money, or at least create the capability for someone else to give the Bara a run for its money. And also the ability for really anyone out there to take their Ford Straight 6 performance level like up 10 steps. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So that's the first question that I want to address. A lot of carbs. It just doesn't give me the shits. Now our second item of the day actually comes from Phoebe Booley on YouTube, who brought up a lot of good tips for novice builders that either we didn't mention in our videos on how to build the Ford Straight 6, or we didn't have very good footage of that just didn't show the parts that he brought up in his comments. So I want to share a couple of those with you. I think they're really good tips, and thank you, Phoebe, for your comments here. I think they're very good. So the first one, for the novice builder, you probably don't have a dedicated ring setter. When gapping rings, it's important to keep rings square in the bore. I usually take one piston, provided it has a flat section around the perimeter, install the second ring temporarily, invert it, and then use it to push the ring I'm gapping uniformly down into the cylinder. So what he's getting at is when we were gapping our piston rings, we had a dedicated ring setter, which was that tripod looking piece of equipment that we used to set the rings into the cylinder. Now, when you're gapping your rings, it's important that your piston rings are perfectly perpendicular to the cylinder walls and that they are perfectly parallel to the deck of the block. And the way that he is recommending that you do this, and it's a really good kind of tip, is that you can take your piston, put in one of the rings, flip it upside down, and use that to press your ring into the cylinder. And that will ensure that you have a perfectly square and parallel piston ring so that you can get an accurate measurement of what your gap is. So a very good tip there. Got a couple of others here. Next one was cleanliness is very important. Thoroughly clean all machining debris from your block, heads, etc. Never use cotton or fabric wipes. Regular paper towels are better. When a block is properly cleaned, you should be able to put some trans fluid on a paper towel and wipe any machine surface and not pick up any debris. I use trans fluid because it has extra detergents in it to attract and suspend separate small particles, and it provides good contrast to help identify contaminants. So that is also a good point, and to be frank, we didn't do a very good job of showing this. It's just something that during the time of filming, I didn't really think to... it's something that we kind of took for granted that everybody knows, and in reality, it's a really good point to bring up, is you need to make sure that everything is super duper clean. Now, somebody brought up that we were, using the piston ring grinder near a bunch of part storage. Well, I can tell you that all that part storage was for pooched or destroyed parts, so it didn't matter if they got dirty. But whenever you assemble an engine, everything that you touch, you want to make sure is absolutely clean. You don't have any particles or debris, because those particles and any type of FOD or foreign object debris is just... every single one of those is a potential to ruin your motor or shorten the life of your motor, mar or scratch or groove your bearings if it gets into your oil, things like that. So he's got a fair point there, and again, we didn't do a very good job of either talking about it or getting footage in this matter. Pre-lubrication, any parts being installed should be well lubricated. Plain motor oil on the pistons and rings is fine. All bearing surfaces should have bearing lube. Absolutely true, and that is what we did. We did show you that we put just standard motor oil in the cylinder walls and on the pistons and the piston rings. What we didn't get very good footage of, and I think this was because I was having camera problems at the moment, was the bearing lube that we put on the rod journals and the crank journals. That is not regular motor oil, and you don't want to use regular motor oil when you're rebuilding a motor, because the dedicated bearing lubrication is great for breaking in the motor. It's much better than standard motor oil, so very good tip there as well. And then lastly, the thing, what he mentioned was regarding installing the crank and the connecting rods, with respect to gauging how much clearance you have for the journals between the crank and the rods and then the subsequent bearings. One method that we didn't use that is also very good to use and is relatively cheap if you don't have the gauges, which you, to be honest, if you're machining a motor you should have, is Plastigauge. So he wrote, use Plastigauge to confirm bearing and crank clearances. Plastigauge is a thin strip of malleable plastic cut off about a 1/2 inch section. Place it lengthwise on the crank, install and torque the bearing cap, remove the cap, and using the gauge on the side of the paper wrapper, match it with the crushed plastic to the bands on the gauge. This will tell you your bearing clearance. If oversized, then reorder bearing sets to bring your clearances to within acceptable limits for your engine. Most bearings are available undersized in increments of 1 thou to 3 thou, and even 10 thou or more. So essentially what he's saying is that when you have, when you're installing your rods and your crank, you can take this little tiny strip of plastic, place it in between either your crank and your rod bearing or your crank and your crank bearing, and then torque them down. And what that's going to do is it's going to smush it flat, and it's going to spread out as it does. And then you will untorque it. You will take that little piece of plastic and compare it to the gauge that comes with the Plastigauge wrapper. And how much it has smushed flat and widened out will tell you what kind of clearance you have between your journals and your bearings. So if you want to do it that way, perfectly acceptable method. So thank you again to Phoebe Booley for your comments. I think those were all very good comments, and I look forward to what other advice or comments that you have in the future. God, that was a big bite. Potato. Anyway, David Rayner on YouTube. So he wrote, Australian here, I had a 250 Crossflow in a 1978 Cortina, and it was a missile. I had no idea there was such a thing as a 300 until just a few years ago, and have wondered if the 300 and 250 are the same family, or are they completely different? If a Crossflow head would bolt onto a 300 block, and if not, which would make more power? 50 extra cubes or a Crossflow head. So this is kind of a multifaceted answer, and I'm going to get to each part here once this car goes by. This is the problem with filming with your garage door up. Anyway, so the 240 head will work with the 300, and the 250 head will work with the 200, but the 250 and the 300 are two different engine families. So they, for starters, the Crossflow capability of the 250 is not going to work for the 300. So that's unfortunate, but not all hope is lost, because the 300 already has Crossflow in the head. So they solved that between, with the 200 and 250, they didn't have Crossflow. But when they went to the 300, they solved that, and they now have Crossflow in there. And even the later versions have electronic fuel injection, which is great. So the 250 does have a slightly higher compression ratio compared to the 300. The 300 is about 8.8, 8.9, and the 250 is about 9.1 to 9.2. The other thing I will say is that if you are here in the United States, the 250 Crossflow head, you either have to have imported from Australia, which is very expensive, and it takes a while to get here, and they're honestly getting harder to find. At least here in the U.S. I know in Australia they're still somewhat fairly abundant, but here in the U.S. they're hard to get. So at the end of that, I would say, given my choice between a stock 250 and a stock 300, I would go with the 300. One, because of the crossflow, but even if I had the crossflow head, the 250 crossflow head from Australia for the 250, I would probably still go with the 300 because I think overall it's even built a little bit stronger. I mean, it's a legendarily indestructible motor. And if you have a later model, it's already got the fuel injection. And because of the lower compression ratio, it's easier to add boost without, really having too many adverse side effects compared to trying to get the 250, which is essentially a stroker version of the 200. So that's more or less my answer on that question. So thank you again, David Rayner. God. Another big ass bite. All right, so our next question comes from Ron Schlorf on YouTube, and so he writes, Engine Gremlin, if you had a basic engine stock and only had 4 cheap-ish bolt-ons to make it a better air pump, as you said, or more reliable for starting and driving, what would that be? Headers, EFI, electronic ignition, something else. So in order of importance, assuming that you're not getting the aluminum cast vintage inline head like we have on this guy, I would say in order of importance, they are these things. First, you need to replace your carburetor and your distributor combo. So the original carburetor is the Autolite 1100. That is essentially a lawnmower carburetor. I mean, it's dinky, it's undersized. Even though the Ford 200 has poor airflow to begin with, it's not enough, and it starts to peter out at about 2,000 to 2,200 RPM. So the distributor has no centrifugal advance, which means that it doesn't really know how fast the motor is going or how hard you're pressing on the gas. So a Pertronix distributor or a Holley Hyperspark distributor is a good replacement there. For the carb, I personally really like the Holley Sniper 1100 EFI unit that uses throttle body injection. But it is a little pricier, but I think it makes the car so much more drivable and so much more reliable during startup. And those things are good to about 160, 170 horsepower. So considering that the stock level is about 100 to 115, I mean, it's got room to grow. So I like that. But if you don't want to go with that throttle body fuel injection from Holley and you're a carb guy, definitely start by shaving off the 1-barrel adapter there and getting yourself a 2-barrel adapter and throwing on like a Weber carb there, the 2 Series Weber carbs. You could get a distributor carburetor combo for about $450 total. So in the second one, get new headers. So you don't have to go as far as these guys for headers, and these are stainless 304 dual collector headers. You don't have to go that far, but the exhaust manifold in the original head is terrible and deadheads, and it's undersized, and it goes to a single collector. You can get a nice dual collector of nickel-plated headers for about $200 that will go right on the old head. So that's the second thing that I recommend, so helping it breathe. The third thing that I recommend after that is getting a new camshaft. So Claysmith Cams, one of our sponsors, has tons, they have tons of different grinds for the Ford 200 inline 6, depending on whatever your performance goals are. They're pretty cheap too. They're between $200 and $300. This is kind of the one mod that's not really bolt-on. There is some engine disassembly here that has to occur in order to get a new cam in there. So heavy quotes around bolt-on, but it doesn't really require any modifications to the motor itself. And then last thing I would say for the fourth one, get yourself some high ratio roller rocker arms. Again, these will also work on the stock log head. So we're particular to the 1.65 ratio roller rockers from Yellowterra that we have on here because they are literally bolt-on. They're a roller rocker design, which is an improvement over the original one. And because that increased arm ratio, You get more valve lift, which helps with airflow. And when you pair that with a cam, it's just going to help your airflow that much better. Now you can use the Rocker Arms Unlimited set. Not really familiar with those, and I don't know what their availability is. And we also like to support our sponsors here at the Engine Gremlin channel. Those are a little pricier. You can get the roller rocker arms from Yellow Terra for about 650 bucks. So all of these, save for the cam, are easy bolt-on mods. I mean, you could do all of them, save for the camshaft, in a weekend, and if you took it to the engine shop, you could do it in a weekend. And they're relatively inexpensive, save for the Sniper EFI throttle body. That's about $900. So all in, for all 4 mods, you're looking between $1,500 and $2,100 for those upgrades. And what's nice about those upgrades is that all of them are transferable if you decide to upgrade your head in the future. So let's say you want to go to the 250 Crossflow head in the future. Well, those will transfer over. You want to go to the Vintage Inlines head. Great. They still transfer over. You don't have a wasted investment. You're not locking yourself into the log head if you get these modifications. So those are the top 4 there. I think those will get you kind of topping out towards the end of the, the Holley Sniper EFI system at 160 to 170, provided you do everything correctly. But yeah, so thank you again to Ron Schlor for that question there. So the next thing that I want to point out is a lot of comments that we saw in part 1 of how to build the Ultimate Ford Straight 6 video with respect to the ridges in the block. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, a lot of you have commented that the ridges were not machined out of the block all the way and that we were headed towards engine failure, etc. And honestly, that's not the case. It's not the truth. It's poor editing and poor footage on my part. So I apologize on that front. I can see how it was a bit misleading, but we did machine out the ridges. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation as to why it appears that we didn't take them out. So originally we did measure the ridges, and according to our measurements, the maximum depth that we could determine was at about 18 to 19 thou. And we were originally planning to go to a 20 thou overbore from stock anyway. And that was based off of a couple of different factors. One was the availability of overbore sizes for the pistons that we had in mind for this build, which in this case were the UEL Silverlight flat top pistons, the aluminum cast pistons. And the next available size up from there was 40 thou. And the max that you can really bore out of 4200 is 60 thou. So we wanted to keep it relatively low for 20 thou. We didn't want to jump straight to 40 thou because, one, that reduces we're going to be adding some power to this motor compared to what it was meant to do stock, which means that the thinner you make your cylinder walls, the less strong that they get. And we want them as strong as we possibly can. The last thing that we want to do on this thing is have to bore it out all the way and sleeve it. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of extra cost. The other thing is that when you go straight to 40 thou or 60 thou, you're reducing the lifespan of your engine with respect to how many times you can rebuild it and bore out the cylinders. So, that's something that we also want to keep in our back pocket because we want to drive this thing a lot. I mean, this is going to be a daily driver on top of being a show car. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that we have some room to go back and rebuild, remachine as necessary as the motor over time needs to be serviced. So here's why it appeared that we didn't machine the grooves out. So we wanted to go straight to the 20 thou overbore. We ordered the pistons, and normally what you would do is machine your block first and then order your pistons. But again, because of the availability of oversized pistons, the next available size was 40 thou. Again, we didn't want to jump to a 40 thou. So we ordered the 20 thou, bored it out to 20 thou, and realized that the ridges were still there. And this is where I didn't do a very good job of capturing the footage. So we determined that we needed to bore out an additional 5 thousandths of material in the cylinder wall, and we did. And when we did so, ridges totally gone. But now we're left with a 25 thou overbore cylinder and a 20 thou oversized piston. And that's not good. So what we ended up doing was shipping the pistons out to a company called Line to Line that specializes in adding material, a high resistance, high wear material to pistons. And then they shipped them back to us with an additional 5 thousandths of material on the piston. So now we had a 25 thou overbore piston. Getting the rings for 25 thou overbore was actually very easy. That wasn't an issue for us. And yeah, so that's why it appears like we didn't machine out the ridges. It has nothing to do with the quality of the machine shop or the engine builder there. DC Racing, those guys are professionals. They're very good. They're not going to leave us hanging with a sloppy subpar engine that's going to blow up after 2,000 miles. So I hope that answers everybody's concerns or questions with respect to the ridges that were, looked like they were still left in the block. God, I can't believe we've done with this. So next I'm going to address the 2JZ head that I have here on my right. So some of you may have noticed on our Instagram page that we recently put out an APB for a 2JZ cylinder head for super secret purposes. And then 2-3 days later, we actually found ourselves a cylinder head. So this is a 2JZ GTE head with variable valve timing, so the VVTi, courtesy of Oleg at Mad Russian's Garage here in Denver. So thank you, Oleg, for providing us with this head. A lot of you have been wondering, why are we looking for a 2JZ head? What are we planning? Well, I'm not going to spoil the secret, but I will say it's part of the ultimate portion of this build, so stage 3. Some of you have speculated that we're going to be adapting, that we're going to try and just throw a 2JZ here onto the Ford 200. No, it doesn't work like that. For starters, the oil galleys and coolant passages and everything else are not the same. They don't match up. Not to mention the fact that the combustion chamber / cylinder diameter is not the same, and then their bore spacing is not the same. So we're not going to be slapping a 2JZ onto the Ford 200. And others have speculated that we're going to be modifying the 2JZ, maybe cutting it up or something to that effect to put it on the Ford 200. And I will tell you, well, that's not it either. You're getting warmer, but you're not there yet. And that's all I'm really going to say on that front. We'll have more updates on what we're doing with this later in the year once we've made some more formal progress and we're ready to formally announce what we're going to be doing with this head and how it concerns the Ford 200 and the ultimate build, or ultimate stage, or stage 3. So stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be really exciting. It's really cool, guys, what we have planned for it. So, stick around, and also I hope you tell your friends. So, anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the 2JZ side. Okay, last bite. Oh, thank God that's over. Okay, so last thing for the mailbag episode is, so what do we have next? So we've got a couple of things coming up next. Next weekend on Sunday, we're going to be releasing the how to upgrade a classic Mustang to a front coilover suspension. That episode is going to be sponsored by Street or Track, and we're going to be showing you step by step how to install their front Bilstein coilover suspension system. Then we're also going to be working on part 3 of how to build the ultimate Ford Straight 6, and that's going to be focused on the full EFI system and how to build that and install it onto your motor. Then we're going to be having part 4, which is dynoing and the dyno numbers. Part 5, which is boost, and the last part of stage 2. That's going to be held off a little bit because there are parts with respect to actually going in the engine that we would prefer to do rather than out of the engine, in the car, as opposed to trying to do it outside of the car. We'd rather just do that once, really. We've got the floor pans, so the floor pans on this car need to be redone, so we'll be showing you how to jack up and level the car perfectly level, and then how to cut out your floor pans and install new ones. We've got ours supplied by CJ Pony Parts, which I think they're a Dynacorn aftermarket pan. I gotta check though. But so we'll be showing you how to do your floor pans. Then we're gonna be doing the rear suspension. That is a rear coilover suspension, the Quadrolink rear suspension from Detroit Speed, which I'm super duper excited to install. That one's going to be really cool, and we'll be doing a how-to on that one as well, so step by step. And then we're going to be doing our rear end install. We got a custom Ford 9-inch rear end with a Eaton True Track Posi limited slip diff. That was built by one of our other sponsors, Quick Performance. So that's really cool. And once all those are done, that's primarily the structural portions of the car and the suspension portion. So at that point, we're going to be stripping this thing down for blasting. Now, we are going to be putting out quotes out there in the community for blasting. So if you know anybody in the Denver area that would like to be involved with blasting this car down to bare metal, please let us know. I know that it's something I personally really want to film, and I want to talk about in greater detail for all of our viewers to become familiar with the sandblasting process. I used to work in a machine shop in high school, and I used to do quite a bit of sandblasting myself, and I want to talk about all the different mediums and how they affect blasting and the appropriate method and approach and angle for blasting. It's all very cool. So again, if you know anybody in the Denver area that would be interested in being part of this project with blasting the car, please let us know. We've reached out to a couple of suppliers and we're still working with them, but we are definitely open to it. So reach out to us if you know somebody and let us know. Other than that, that's everything that we had planned for today's mailbag episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you so much for your comments and your questions. I enjoyed reading them all, and you guys have actually been very positive and supportive on this through the whole way, so I really appreciate you guys. This has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but it's definitely been worth it. The potato part sucked, won't lie. That was not fun, but as I said, I'm a man of my word, so when we hit 2,000 subs, we will follow through with our next subscriber reward, so don't forget to subscribe or tell your friends to subscribe, and let us know what you'd like to see us do when we hit that mark. Other than that, I think that covers it for today, and I will see you guys next time. What? No, it's 9 a.m. Of course I don't. If it was the afternoon, yeah, probably, but no.